loud. Why not? Okay, so yes, this content warning. We're just gonna get started. Give me a break. Okay, this is our agenda. We're going to just like briefly discuss what is safer service, why do we need it, just an overview of smart serve and liquor liability, some slower service tactics, barriers to safer service, but you can read, so it's all here. This is what we're talking about. And I guess before we jump into that, a little bit about me is that chances are if you're like at this training, you've probably already at least read my bio. I don't think there's any point in like wasting time qualifying who I am. I think the only things that are relevant are that I have experience, both lived and professional, with like every aspect of what we're about to discuss. And in terms of my relationship to the hospitality industry, I've worked in everything from strip club to golf club, been around a long time. I know I look like really youthful. Like it's hard to imagine that I could have spent like decades in this industry. It's only this lighting and because I recently had Botox that I look this like well rested and youthful. All right. And so the question that we need to ask is, what is safer service? That would be, to me, practical skills, tactics, policies, and procedures informed by anti-oppression and harm reduction in order to help cultivate safer spaces where alcohol is served, to promote intentional consumption, and to enact ways of addressing conflict or harm when it arises. And the thing is that everything that I'm discussing today, chances are you're like already doing these things, you've already thought about these things. In no way is this training going to be exhaustive. It might be exhausting, but it's not going to be exhaustive. I just think it's important for us to bring these concepts to the front of our mind and then to be intentionally practicing these skills and tactics. So a lot of this is probably not going to feel or seem new. And I also just want to name the fact that if you've ever had the pleasure of being trained by me before, you know that I am really, really funny and lighthearted and pleasure-centered. And that is in no way intended to, you know, minimize or be like sanitizing or trivializing of the content that we're discussing today. All right, so why doesn't this want to do that? Okay, whatever. Do we need safer service? The answer is yes. I personally don't enjoy statistics. I don't like when we run through all of the like, this percentage of people will be harmed by gender-based violence in your life, right. I find it really like trauma porny. And I also think that it is in a lot of ways unnecessary. As far as I'm concerned, if there is even one person who can benefit from us creating safer spaces, then this training is worthwhile. What I would say, though, that is relevant to this is that when we look at gender-based violence and sexual violence affecting everybody across the gender spectrum, across the sexuality spectrum, alcohol is the most used drug to facilitate those harms. And that's why I think it's important that we have an intentional discussion about how to serve more safely. And then I also too, and in the chat, if you want to answer this, I don't know about y'all, but the holiday season, let alone holiday season in pandemic, when it seems like nobody knows how to act right anymore, people tend to get and want to get wasted. Why do people want to get wasted? You know, like I want people to kind of engage in the chat and be like, why is that part of the culture of the season? And as I said, everybody needs safer service. Everybody can benefit from it, including yourselves. Because the thing is that when we're talking about these kinds of harms, when we're talking about spaces that become unsafe because people are over intoxicated, you know, there is only so much we can do to prevent harm and violence when that is somebody's intention to do. What happens when people are overly intoxicated, etc., is that there are avoidable harms. And we're not just talking about guests, we're talking about your coworkers, we're talking about your managers, we're talking about your owners, not your owners, but the owners of establishments. And these are your peers, and you are affected as well. This isn't just about creating safer space for guests. This is about creating safer space for yourselves. All right. No one in the chat mentioned why people get wasted. Okay. Unfortunately, sometimes they don't own the tab and don't have to pay for it. So there's like many factors of why people get fucked up in general, but during the holidays especially. It's a really tense time of year. And I know that if you're working in this industry, you have probably done Smart Serve, right? I think you have to do it. I haven't done it for like 2 decades, but I did review some of what Smart Serve is saying. And certainly there has been the addition to helping to prevent sexual violence, alcohol facilitated sexual violence within Smart Serve. But Smart Serve is one of those things where it's like, yeah, those are like ideal things, right? Like we can say like, oh, women can only drink this many, or you can't drive, or whatever it is, but we know it is so much more nuanced than that. And so the questions I want us to think about are like, are Smart Serve protocols commonly in practice, right? Like how often are we actually, when we're at the point of service, practicing Smart Serve? Things like not serving someone who's already intoxicated, or things like serving doubles, as an example, is like one of those breaches to Smart Serve. We also have to ask, is liquor liability my problem? Like if you are not the manager or the owner of an establishment, are you familiar with what liquor liability is? Like what, not just from like a licensing and like legal standpoint, but are we considering what that liability is when we're in service? And in the chat, if you wish to say, like, has anybody ever looked at what is necessary for incident reporting? Like, have you ever reported an incident? One of the links in this training, at the end of the training, is a fulsome guide to incident reporting. And it's even things as kind of commonplace as someone presenting a fake ID. We're technically supposed to be making a report about this with like date and time and signed off and ray. And it's like, are these things something that you're familiar with? Is it something that you have done? And is it something that you feel confident doing? And do you have the time to do it? Right. So someone in the chat is saying that they've never had protocols for incident reporting. And this is the next question that we ask is, when you were onboarded, when you were being trained, when you were hired, was Smart Serve or liquor liability discussed with you? And certainly I imagine that y'all work in different types of hospitality environments. There's nuances to all of that. There's things that kind of come with the culture of certain spaces. But again, it's like, I want you to be thinking about these things. And as you enter into this holiday season where service is a little bit different, or can be, do you know what these things are? And if you are the folks who are crafting beverages, if you are the ones who are designing beverages, are you aware of how those beverages align with Smart Serve and liquor liability? All right. So I want to be real practical with y'all. I like to imagine myself as someone who teaches in a practical way. I am not. I'm like quite dramatic and esoteric. So it was really important that I front loaded this training with what some slower service tactics can be. And forgive me if my voice sounds like shit. I have tonsillitis, which is violent to me because I talk for a living. Menu. So this may or may not be something that you have control over, but it's something that you can definitely bring to folks that you work with who do. So when we are looking at menus, whether this is like a set menu that a client has agreed to, or it's just your commonplace menu, one of the ways that we can encourage slower service is to have low alcoholic and non-alcoholic options visible and on par with your alcohol options. And when I say visible, I mean that a lot of times bars and restaurants, the culture has really shifted to have low alcohol and non-alcoholic beverages be something that's like a lovely time and like a mature adult experience. Like we don't need to drink club soda out of like giant plastic cups just because we don't drink alcohol. But are those drinks featured on your menus? Are they visible? Are they talked about? Are they promoted? And on par means that if you've got a bunch of wine, liquor, whatever, spirits, high alc cocktails, do you have low alc and non alc options in the same volume as those options? And also ensuring that food is present and available. Like now, this isn't always possible in certain spaces. Like I haven't been to a club in 300 years, but I know that like when I did go to clubs, it wasn't like, okay, we can also have hors d'oeuvres at 2 a.m. when I'm doing shots or whatever, right? So it's like, what can you create that makes food present and available? And if you're looking at preset menus or client packages, including food in that, being like, sorry, you can't just have booze, even if you're coming for an after dinner thing. This has to be present. I used to work in a strip club where, in order to have the license, we had to have food. And it was like literally a can of Campbell's soup on like the back wall, being like, we technically have food if like the liquor inspector ever came by, which is, bullshit. We did order like pizza and stuff though. All right. And then there's policy and protocols. And I think that these are the areas where we can start to look at our culture, look at our style of service, and also acknowledge the fact that these types of policies and protocols are the things that are going to make de-escalation skills useful and bystander intervention skills useful, which we'll talk about in a sec. So having as like a hard boundary, no shots, no doubles, other behaviors that promote fast or over consumption. And when I was thinking about doing this training and I was talking to Christina Vera about it, she brought up the thing of, even from like a business owner perspective, it doesn't benefit y'all to have people wasted at the top of an evening, right? It's like you want them to stay all night and continue enjoying themselves and intentionally consuming so that not only is it like a safer, nice time, but that is a more meaningful way to make it worthwhile. And again, it's like these are the types of policies that might result in pushback from people. I don't know if anyone's ever worked like weddings and that sort of thing. It's like people want to do shots, they want to have doubles, they want to have big big glasses of wine. And that brings us to our next thing, which is like accountable bottle service or self-pouring. So if in your establishment people are buying bottles of wine, I mean, I'm sure they are, or if you're in a club, whatever it is, what accountable bottle service and self-pouring looks like is to not serve bottles or things like that where the number of people present cannot consume it in an intentional or I don't know, like reasonable way. And that's not to say like you can't necessarily just look at someone and be like, oh, you can't drink a whole bottle of wine to yourself. It's like maybe they can and they can like totally be fine and normal, but assume that within those smart serve parameters per se, or just even your own lived experiences, people who do this work, that it's like, that's going to be a lot for the time frame or the number of people. And then lastly, and probably least popularly, is popularly a word? Yeah, right. Popularly, less popularly, is no consumption while on shift. So if you are serving, bartending, being a manager, you're the owner of an establishment, not consuming alcohol or drugs while you are working. And again, this depends on the culture of your space. I know that folks who are partying, your guests are like, oh, I want to buy you a drink, or let's, I blah, 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 blah. The reason why it's irresponsible, and I don't like the word irresponsible because it's like moralistic, but the reason why consuming while you're on shift is a barrier to safer service is because if you do not have your full wits about you, you cannot then determine your interactions or your space around you. And that makes it unsafe for others as well, right? Um, just wait till after work. That's it. And maybe drinking makes your job more fun. I get it. However, what we're talking about is extending ourselves to make spaces safer for everyone. And I'm going to talk about ways to navigate that when we get into de-escalation and that sort of thing. So, come on. All right. We've talked a little bit about safer service. Do people on the in the chat want to name some things that are 12 neat tequila? Yes, exactly. It's like, oh, it's not a shot, it's in a rock glass. Look, I know all the little workarounds. I am a 7 years sober alcoholic who worked in the hospitality industry for many years. I know all the little tricks to get around policies. The point is understanding the spirit and intent of the policy and upholding that. So if people in the chat want to suggest for you in your experience, given just like the few options that I presented, what are the barriers to safer service? What are some of the barriers that you're confronted with when it comes to safer service? I can wait. Someone has said that managers and owners um, who won't support you, guests, especially hosts, getting angry at you. They don't support you in cutting someone off, especially, VIPs. This is a real issue. And anytime I come into a hospitality space to do anti-oppression, anti-racism work, when we do policy and infrastructure work, this is one of the things that is top of discussion, which is that ownership and management need to have infrastructure and policy that is overarching no matter who is in the space. And I've said this in a recent conduct training where it's like, you need to be able to kick me out. You know what I mean? If I can't act right. And there's always this risk when we're serving bartending that we could be like, hey, I know you want another drink. I think you've had enough. And then management comes over and they're like, no, I'll pour it, all these things. It is so important that these discussions are had intentionally with management and owners. And that brings us to that first question or one of those questions that I asked in Safer Service is that when you were hired, when you were onboarded, was liquor liability and smart serve discussed? Was anti-oppression and things like that discussed? And I know for some of you, chances are if you're here, I've probably already trained you, and it's because your ownership or your management or your peers are having these conversations. Do I think that the onus should be on y'all to advocate for and navigate anti-oppression, safer service, all those things? No, I definitely do not. But the same way that anti-sexual violence work, gender-based violence work, anti-racism work is always fueled by the literal blood, sweat, and tears of survivors. This is kind of, the proletariat is responsible to shift and make change. And I don't say responsible as in we should be. I'm saying that that's what's up. Someone has said being forced to work a section, I guess, that you've told management makes you uncomfortable. Yeah, like it's so icky. And what I want to say is that policies and infrastructure exist within the Employee Standards Act and within the Ontario Human Rights Code. Best case scenario is we educate ourselves on what those things are and that we follow up and we advocate for ourselves. It's shitty. I 100% agree. But the more you know your rights, the more willing or more prepared you are and empowered you are to assert them. And somebody said, like, sometimes it's a matter of my safety versus paying rent. That is absolutely real, especially in these times, and this idea that we're like disposable and all of that. I want to say that I recognize those as very real conditions, and that our best case scenario is reconciling within that. And again, there's 24 people on this training, right? I seem to recall in spring 2020, hundreds, if not thousands of y'all had so much to say about safer space and all of that. So when we're thinking about these systems and our willingness to push back against them, people are only willing to push back against so much as long as it doesn't protect or benefit them, right? This again is something that, as people who are trying to enact social change, that is one of our biggest barriers, is people's apathy and benefit from these systems. So again, it's like all I can do is name that. These are the barriers that I kind of came up with and what I thought of, which was like understaffing. We know that there's staff shortages, undertrained staff. People are consistently onboarding, changing jobs, moving places, wearing masks. Like, if this much of your face is covered and this much of your patron's face is covered, it's not as easy to hear or to observe, or again to assess somebody's state of mind. And again, as I said, I just got Botox, so this much of my face is covered, and like literally someone was telling me a sad story the other day, and I had to tell them, I'm like, oh, I'm frowning, like, you don't know I'm frowning. Like, there are many reasons why we can't read people because we're wearing masks. The culture of the space, which I've talked about. Some spaces we work, it is a very normal thing for staff to be drunk, to be on drugs, for ownership to be drinking, for there to be VIPs who make us uncomfortable, all of those things. Auxiliary substances. So what I mean by that is people who have brought in their own alcohol, people who are doing drugs, and that's not necessarily something that we can control. A patron's intentions. Like, if somebody is like, I'm here to get fucked up tonight, like, that is why I came. It's on my boss's tab. Like, I'm in it. I'm doing it. As well as if somebody's intention is to cause harm, it's like, that is a barrier to safer service. Having a lack of policy, having a lack of support. So people mentioned that in the chat, the volume of service and not being able to communicate. So in a fast-paced environment, are you able to check in with your coworkers and say, like, I cut that person off, or that person might only be able, like, do you have the time to navigate that? Do you have access to your management, your hosts, or your ownership? As well as licensing. So something that comes up, I think, is that when we think about intent to cause harm, we're talking about drugging, we're talking about over serving with intention. And some spaces have policy about, like, no drinks in the stairway, no drinks in the washroom. And a lot of times that has to do with licensing, like, oh, the stairway is not licensed for liquor, or the washrooms are not. And in those circumstances, we need to have a plan in place to navigate that, because something that also happens when we say, oh, you can't bring your drink in, or you can't bring it down the stairs, everybody is urgent. When you're out, you're urgent. You got a plan. It's like, okay, well, I'm not leaving my drink. I'm not abandoning my drink. I just paid $17 for this glass of wine or whatever. I'm going to down it. Right. These are the things that are in place for one reason, but then actually promote a lack of safer service for others. Can folks in the chat kind of just jump in and tell me whether this is all resonating or tracking, or if this makes any fucking sense? Because obviously my ideal is to do this in person, where I can like gauge your reactions, gauge your responses, understand if you're understanding me. The reason why it's virtual is, like, not only are we in Pandorama, but also I wanted this to be as accessible as possible, and trying to rally people all together to do this was like not a viable thing in this time window. So, okay, thank you for people who are like, okay, yes, I'm hearing you. What I'm hoping is everything I've talked about so far is validating to you, right? Oh, yay, Lauren, you're in Manitoba. I'm sorry it snowed here too. I don't know what you're going through out there, but yeah, so they adjusted the licensing to allow stairwell and bathroom. Um, but a lot of people still enforce it, yeah, because of drink safe, like glassware and everything like that. But again, it's like when we can do an assessment of our space, right? This is what I'm encouraging. The whole point of this is to, as I said, bring it to the front of your mind so that you can assess what are the barriers to safer service in my establishment. And it is these things. And so when we do that, we can then establish a plan or a workaround that is going to help us to navigate that. So in Trinidad, for example, you can just like take drinks anywhere the hell you want, but you can't take glass anywhere you want. The same thing is true in New Orleans, if any of y'all have partied down there. And there's always like plastic glassware, plastic cups, and things like that at those points of changing of the safety of having glassware, right? So it's like those are the types of workarounds. And like I've seen some really lovely plastic glassware come out in this. Y'all pivoted a million times. You know what the fuck to do, right? It's like there are ways to address every single one of these things, except for, you know, things like understaffing, undertrained staff, wearing masks. So it's just about acknowledging that these are barriers and having them factor into how etc. So someone in the chat is saying it's all super helpful. I've had numerous inquiries ask for our COVID plans and vaccination numbers, but be flummoxed when we talk about the venue's safe service rules. Yeah, and this is the thing, like a lot of people don't think about these things, right? Because they don't have the empathy or the entry point into it as something to be considered or as an issue, the same way that guests come in and feel super entitled to y'all, your time, your personal information, your bodies, all of it is like no, 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 no. And so by having these conversations, by navigating that confusion from them, it creates an entry point into them to be like, oh, you know what, I've never thought about that. And like, oh, that's not what they do over there. It's like, well, that's what we do here. And that is always my position. All right. Is bystander intervention where I want to go right now? This might be a little bit out of order, but what I would say is that bystander intervention, so I'm going to pull this apart a bit because sometimes I can take for granted the language that I'm using because it's so commonplace to me. When we think about what bystander intervention is, it is, let's say there's an incident, whether that's an incident of harassment or conflict, etc. If you are someone who is present around it, you are a bystander, right? And then bystander intervention is when you, as the bystander, intervene. You're like, I'm gonna investigate this situation. I'm gonna find out what's going on here. And some of us are more inclined to do that than others. Like I am a quintuple fire sign. I am always the bystander who is intervening. Like I will look out my window and see an incident and I'm like downstairs being like, is there something going on here that I can assist with? Like that is going to be in my disposition. And honestly, if it's not you, if you are not that, that's okay, because one of the D's of bystander intervention is delegate, and you know who those people are on your team. You know who the ones are, right? So bystander intervention is a set of tools or approaches that can help us to dispassionately and unemotionally intervene when something is going on. And if we look back at those, you know, when we talked about the what were we talking about? The policy things around things like, even this can be anything from like a guest being like, well, I'm paying this bill, so I want a double, and I organize this party, and I say that we can have shots, et cetera, et cetera. And that person who is experiencing that interaction, the bartender, the server, the host, the owner, whatever, whoever it is, it can be anything from intervening in that type of situation to an incident of sexual harassment, somebody being predatory on someone who's intoxicated, like there's a wide range of when we can intervene. The 5 Ds of bystander intervention are, the first is distract. So ignoring the harasser and connect with, engage directly with the person who is being targeted. So that would be if you are working behind the bar and you see that one of your colleagues is being like accosted, or there seems to be a body language that feels unsafe, you go over to your colleague and you say like, hey, like, did you need something? Or like, and you don't even have to say like, is everything okay? Like, you don't have to signal or flag that much. You can just ask them for help with a task is one of the examples, etc. The same thing is true is that if you're witnessing something predatory happening, intervening directly with the person who is being potentially targeted. And please feel free in the chat if you wish to use to give me some examples of things that have happened, like well, what would I do if this happened? And I will elaborate on how this model applies to that. Okay. Also, is everyone enjoying how on brand this is? Like, this is my wall in my playroom, and it also aligns with this presentation. And you got this for free? Like, that's fucking wow. Like, that added value. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. But yes, please do give examples in the chat of when something has occurred in an interaction with guests, and an interaction with your coworkers, and an interaction with ownership, whatever, where this might be useful. The next is delegate. As I said, you don't have to be the one, right? Sometimes there are dynamics that are at play that make it unsafe for you to be the person who intervenes, whether that is power dynamics amongst staff, whether that's like physical dynamics, like if there's folks who are like really big and you're like not big, that might be an opportunity to delegate. If someone is belligerent, if someone is drunk, it is always like, first and foremost, like management. You go to management. I know that we want to have the tools and we want to be able to navigate that situation. Maybe your management is busy, whatever. It is like within liquor liability and smart serve and all those things that management or ownership is responsible for navigating intoxicated guests. And certainly we have intoxicated guests who are just really having a nice time and they're never going to be the one to be like, rah! But if they are, that would be an example of when to delegate. All right. One of the things that I've said in here is avoid calling 911 unless absolutely necessary. Police are unsafe. Police are unsafe. Police are unsafe. In this document at the end, there is a link called don'tcallthepolice.com. Like, it's really just don'tcallthepolice.com. Don'tcallthepolice.com. And it's by city. And there is a list of resources and a list of alternatives to calling the police. That said, when we get into intervening in drugging and sexual violence, I'm going to talk about what to do from a transformative justice and harm reduction approach when you do have to call the police. One of the alternatives to calling the police that I offer to industry folks is know who's in your community, know who's around you, know which other bars, restaurants, spaces are nearby you, which I know y'all do. You're a community. And if you need help from folks who are around, you can create a community of support around that. And I always encourage folks to do that. Documenting. So we talked about incident reporting. Listen, like, I know that we're not doing that. I know that folks are not being like, oh, I had to remove this guest, or like, that is not something that is common practice. It's just like more bureaucracy, more work, etc. However, if you are observing that, like if you're involved in something that is harassment, if you have removed a guest who is violent, documenting that can be, I don't believe in like filming or taking pictures of people without consent. But that can be things like I've said here, note the time, the date, the description of the person. Because again, it's like we all know that just because you've expelled someone from your bar, right, or your restaurant, just because you're like, nope, you're done, you got to get out of here, that person's just going to go somewhere else. Like when people are drunk, they are determined. It's like the Hulk. It's like, I know what I'm here to do, which is to cause chaos, and they will go and do it anywhere they can. And so having that documentation can then help you to follow up with folks after the fact. And that brings us to delay. Sometimes we can't intervene. Sometimes there's reasons why we cannot intervene in a situation. Nothing is worse when something happens to you than nobody following up and checking up on you after, whether that is you as like a staff member, whether that is you as a guest somewhere, whether that, blah, 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 blah. If you witness something and you're not able to intervene, or you're unsure if you should, you don't want to disrupt someone else's agency, you can always follow up with your coworker after, being like, hey, are you good? Like, are you good? That seemed tense or whatever. And they might be like, no, I'm not, I actually need a second, or yes, I am, or that sort of thing. I think even just being able to make eye contact with somebody who is like in the midst of something can be really, really helpful. And we'll talk about checking in and following up after. And then there's direct. Again, this isn't always going to be the best approach, but directly addressing someone who is being disruptive, violent, predatory, all of those things. Does anybody, like, it would be helpful, I think, for everyone if in the chat people would give an example of a situation where they didn't know what to do that's like specific as it relates to bystander intervention. I just want to make sure that I'm actually giving you practical language and tools to navigate these situations, because they happen quickly. Like they happen really quickly, or they can. We can just sit quietly and reflect on how it snowed and how difficult that was emotionally. Like, I don't know about y'all, but when I looked out the window yesterday morning, my actual reaction was, no, I don't fuck with snow. And I also see snow as a barrier to safer service, because people are more likely to get rides from people they wouldn't otherwise. Okay. Direct eye contact, do you need help, has been really helpful in my experience. Yes, absolutely. I really believe in that. Someone has mentioned trauma response. So when we are involved in an incident, and again, the spectrum ranges, our window of tolerance for altercation ranges. Like if you're someone who is of these streets, you may not react emotionally to certain types of confrontation, right? You might just be like, oh yeah, that ain't shit. Like I'm used to it. Like I live in Parkdale, for example. Trauma responses can be fight, freeze, fawn. Fight would be immediately going into like matching someone's aggressive energy. Freeze might be like, I'm immobilized, I've dissociated, I don't know what's happening, I don't know what's happening. As well as fawn. Fawn is when it's like people pleasing, overextending yourself to like try to make things better at your expense, at the expense of your safety. Those are responses in those situations. Also, no matter what, the reason why we have those responses, right, is adrenaline. So sometimes in the moment, we are like, no, I'm fine. Like, it's okay. Like, I'm whatever. And it's not until after, when that adrenaline releases, that we realize it's like, oh, actually, whoa, like that was really harmful, or like that was really triggering, or that was really damaging to me. And that is the importance of the D part of this, that delay part of it, the check-in afterwards, like that I mentioned I'm going to say. Yeah, and someone in the chat has said like how many times you've had like a racist encounter where in the moment you're just like navigating through it, and it isn't until you get home and you like feel it in your body, or there's someone who can witness that experience with you. I absolutely understand that, as well as, things like sexual harassment, where it is so common that we just kind of hold it, and then it's like after the fact where we're like, ew, and like you have to put those emotions somewhere. And when we talk about creating safer spaces, safer service, it means that there is that capacity to have those conversations, and that there's the space to do that in a way that's appropriate, in a way that aligns with the service that you're trying to provide. Does anybody else want to give an example where bystander intervention might be necessary, where they haven't known what to say or they haven't known what to do? I'm going to talk about de-escalation next, and that's going to be helpful to also frame more specifics. All right, I'm going to move on. De-escalation. So de-escalation applies to like all of our interactions all the time. And the ideal with de-escalation is that we don't get to a point where we are emotionally responding, as well as we are not matching dysfunctional, disruptive, harmful energy. And the ways that we can do that are, I have a list of do's and don'ts. So the first do of de-escalation is check your bias, right? And checking our bias is anything from any assumptions that we may make based on someone's appearance, presentation, whatever it is, the way they speak, based on race, gender, mobility, perceived sexual orientation, again, perceived gender, perceived race, like all these things. When we're interpreting somebody's interaction, when we're looking at those like D's of bystander intervention, asking ourselves, like, is this a situation where I need to intervene? Are we checking our bias about how we interpret the way people's body language and how people move? Is that affecting our assessment of a situation? So the first do of de-escalation is checking your bias. The next do, which is kind of the like, this is the gully works of the purpose of de-escalation, is to remember your end goal. Remember your end goal is going to prevent you from emotionally responding and matching the energy of someone who is dysfunctional, right? The end goal may be to have someone like not receive a drink because they've had enough, right? Your end goal may be to explain to somebody, or to, again, I think of it a lot in terms of like service, where it's like, the thing about shots, doubles, etc. Remembering that the goal of your interaction with this person is not necessarily that they are like fully satisfied and they've gotten what they've wanted, but that you've made the assessment, you've made the decision, I'm not serving this, I'm not doing this, I'm not, whatever it is, and the end goal is to accomplish that. And if you stay there in your end goal, it'll be harder for someone to thingy you. What am I trying to say? Christina, put it in the chat. What am I trying to say? You know what this means. They can't trick you. Okay, what I have to tell you is that 1 p.m. is literally my nap time, and that's when my brain has stopped working. Okay, so shit might get a little bit fuzzy from here on out. Acknowledge their frustration. So most people, when they're like wilding out, they just want to be heard, right? They want to undermine is a good one. Yeah, undermine, or yeah, undermine is great. Thank you, Marin. People just want to be heard, right? Acknowledging your frustration is like, and it doesn't have to be this like literal and denotative, like, I understand your frustration. It's like, I hear you, like, I love doing shots too, or like, I know it's the holidays, like it's fun to party, or I know your boss is paying, like, I get it. Lead with that kind of empathy, right? Where it's like, yeah, no, I feel you. Like, this policy, like, ugh, but here we are, and I can't serve you, right? Having a plan for solutions, or being able to ask a guest what would make them more comfortable with the outcome. So if the outcome is like, I'm not serving you, right? Dissuaded or moved. Thank you, Christina. That is correct. I was asking for the word dissuaded. what can make them more comfortable with the outcome, which is like they're not getting what they want. It's like, you know what? I can't serve you a double, but I can serve you a single. And when you come back, I'm going to serve you another single. It's going to be great. Like, you're going to love it. You're going to enjoy the profile of this cocktail more because you're having it in this volume, whatever it is. And they'll be like, okay, yeah. Like, you can't just be like, no. When people hear no, we become infant children. And it's like, well, why? 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 You know, and you need to know what that why is. And that why needs to be something that people can empathize with and identify with. So it's like, you know what? I want you to have the best time tonight for the rest of the night. And this is what's up, you know? And I also think that you can lean into your professionalism. And professionalism, I mean, as in your expertise, is like, you know what? I've been making drinks for a really long time. And I know that this is like the best way to have this experience. And I want you to have the best experience. People be like, okay, right? That would be having a plan for solutions. And again, it's like, if you have to delegate to someone who has more language or more authority to say, hey, yeah, no, it's just, that's not it, then do that. So knowing who your next in command is or who to defer to. And again, sometimes you're going to have people on your team who have a better time or an easier time communicating or dissuading a guest that they don't need whatever it is that they think that they need, and knowing how to language that. And again, I don't want to get into too many specifics because it's going to be nuanced to your specific space, but that is how we de-escalate. So often people try to distract you with other issues. Food came out late and I had to wait for drinks and now I'm cut off. If you know what the solution is, no more service, just figure out calm and firm ways to get to that moment. Exactly that. And someone said they enjoyed the way that I stated that, sort of using kindness to drive those decisions. Yes, you know, when I talk about my approach to teaching, no matter what it is that I'm teaching, I always believe in emotional intelligence, leading with self-awareness, and self-awareness is awareness of self as well as how we affect others, responding versus reacting. Because when someone comes to you all wild, you know, especially when you're busy, you're tired, you're stressed, like you've been working 7,500 days in a row, 800 hours a day, like you want to pop off. You want to be like, you know what, to be honest with you, GFY, like the answer is no. Like, you want to react. But what's going to be more effective and sustainable, not only for what your end goal is, but also your own like self, is to respond. And the way to respond is with empathy and with getting that person on board with the decision that you are co-creating with them. Someone has said, I found it helpful to acknowledge like, hey, I can tell you folks went somewhere else first and I'm so glad you're having fun, but I'm comfortable keeping it at one drink at a time right now. Exactly that. Because what we know about empathy is that when we want to cultivate empathy in children, for example, we have to start with critical thinking. And critical thinking is only cultivated when we explain. So we don't just say, no, that's that. We say, like, this is why. And then people are like, oh, okay, I identify with that why. I am going to adopt this as my belief as well. And now I'm going to behave in a way that aligns with that belief. Because it's not just like, no, I'm not just on a power trip. It's not about that. It's about, you know, we're all just trying to have a nice time. And the thing, you know, if you've ever spoken to me before, you know that my default setting is like, you know what, we all live in hell. I get it. I'm with you. Let's just try to have the nicest time possible. And in order to do that, this is the move. How do you feel about that? And they'll be like, okay. Or they'll be like, no. And you'll be like, well, guess what? You have to leave. And like, that's probably not what they want either. And if they say like, well, I'm going to go somewhere else, be like, I hope you have a wonderful evening. All right. If you observe perceived conflict and a staff member is alone, intervene by checking in with the staff member, not the guest. It can be part of our instinct. Like if you see somebody acting wild, you might be like, hey, like back off or whatever. It's like, that's the next step. The first step is to address your the person in perceived conflict. There's two reasons for that. One, because you can't reason with someone who's unreasonable. And two, you don't want to take away the agency of your coworker, right? Like you want to make sure that you're not you're not inserting yourself in a situation that will then escalate the situation. So it's like, hey, like, are you good? Can I help you with anything? Right. The next piece is identify when to call it. And as I said, when someone is not reasonable, you cannot reason with them. So know what that point is. And again, y'all are professionals. As I said, what I'm talking about are things you've probably already like discussed and cultivated amongst yourselves. I just want to give it a name, which is like, you know what? I can't reason with this person. So the next steps are they have to leave, or they've conducted themselves in a way that is like a hard no, like this person has to leave. Staying calm, which is easier said than done, of course. But the more you stay calm, the more you can invite someone who is not calm into that energy. It's not going to be 100% effective, but it's definitely, if you come up to 100 when they're at 100, there's no chance of the getting calm. And if you find that you've gotten to 100, you can always intervene in yourself. You can always be like, you know what, this has gotten out of hand. Let's bring it down. Like look me in the eyes. Let's chill the fuck out. All right. And most importantly is checking in with each other after an incident. And that can be like immediately after, that can be at the end of a shift, that can be the day after, that can be a week after, because again, it takes people different timelines to process what has happened. I just want to name that it is now 1 p.m. We started about 12:10. I'm going to be kind of concluding this in the next 10 minutes when I talk a little bit more about the ickier stuff. So I just want to prepare folks for that. And I want you to stick around for it. If you were like, I have a hard out at 1, I hope you have 10 more minutes. Checking in with each other after an incident is very important. I also want to offer some practical things in terms of like, when you're offered drinks on shift or whatever, what you can say, because someone's like, I won't take no for an answer, right? And say, well, we actually have a staff tab. If you want to buy a drink, we'll put it on the staff tab and I can have my drink after work, right? That sort of thing. Give them an option. Like, oh, I don't drink on shift so that I can be really good at my job. I would love to, but how about you buy us a round of drinks for after work? And that's what you do. And the don't take it personally. Okay, look, sometimes it's personal. Sometimes they're racist ass or sexist or misogynistic or homophobic or whatever. Even then, I would say it's not personal. That's their messery. Like that's them being a mess. Again, not taking things personally is easier said than done. And that's why it's so important that we have those follow-ups and those processes of unpacking something that's happened, where somebody outside of you can be like, that wasn't about you, or like, that's not your fault, or that sort of thing. Don't over explain policies or guidelines. Like if someone doesn't want to hear it, they don't want to hear it. Just know that those policies and guidelines are there to protect you. And don't crowd if there's an incident occurring. So yeah, don't crowd, because that just riles people up more. You can make eye contact, you can check and be like, you good, but keep it pushing. Or be someone on the outside who is documenting. Just know what your role is in an incident. Does anybody have any thoughts, questions, concerns about that insofar as like needing a specific for the ways that de-escalation can look in an actual real-time circumstance? And remembering that guess is not always right. And as a condition of the ESA and Human Rights Code of Ontario, there are grounds to refuse service to anyone being abusive to you. I think it's important that we qualify what abuse is. Someone being rude ass is not abuse, right? It sucks, but being rude is not abuse. I would say abuse would be, and that's not to like invalidate abuse, like your interpretation or your experience of abuse is your own, but just be intentional when we think about when we use language like abusive or harassment. All right. So the tough stuff, signs of drugging. So part of why I wanted to do this training is because drug facilitated and alcohol facilitated sexual assault, as well as like gender based violence, is a really common thing. Like it is very, very commonplace. And it's not something that people talk about openly. You know, we have all of our like whisper networks and all these different things. But it is really important that we ourselves are able to identify the signs of drugging or the signs of what I think of as like increased risk level intoxication, right? So sometimes the person has intoxicated themselves and there's someone who is around who is going to take advantage of that. Like it's not always this like clear cut case of someone being like, oh, I put a benzo in your drink. You know what I mean? Like there are many nuances to this and many approaches to this. The reason why it's important that we're able to identify these signs is not only do we want to be able to support someone who is a guest or a coworker or whatever who's in our space, if we're able to perceive that this is something that they're experiencing, it's also for our own selves, right? Like when I say we as if I'm like working at the bar with y'all, maybe I will be, like, who knows? You yourself as a staff, like this can happen to you while you are at work or while you are out yourself. So signs of drugging, the first one always is disproportionate intoxication. So disproportionate being you are more intoxicated or someone appears to be more intoxicated than what is reasonable based on what they consumed or what you yourself have consumed, right? That's the number one. People use all sorts of things to dope drinks. I don't need to get into all of that. There's going to be a link in the end of the slides where you can read all about it. It's not nice. But yes, disproportionate intoxication is the number one thing. The next thing is drowsiness, imbalance or unconsciousness, loss of coordination, slurring, impaired judgment, nausea, and then, of course, blacking out. You can interact with someone who is in a blackout and you might not even know, right? I think that we assume that blacking out or that sort of thing is something we can perceive. It is not necessarily something we can perceive. People can be fully blacked out and like moving around the world. Like that is real. That's why you have to look for those other signs like imbalance, slurring. Impaired judgment can be anything from like not like can be anything from like someone holding a cigarette and like lighting another cigarette. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, I forgot I was smoking. Like just those types of things. And again, these are things that you can observe in yourself, but if you observe this in a guest, right? So survivor support. I say survivor meaning, you know, whether this is someone who has been drugged or someone who is overly intoxicated or risk level intoxicated, and you've observed this. This can also include somebody who's already been harmed, right? Because these harms can happen in your spaces. They happen in washrooms, they happen in stairwells, they happen outside, like all that thing. So the first thing you want to do if someone has been drugged or they are over intoxicated is you want to get them to safety. And safety is going to be somewhere quiet, somewhere reasonably lit, and sitting up. You don't want people lying down because if they get nauseous or if they're vomiting, that can be really harmful, right? The next thing you want to do is to try to find out if they're alone. They may have friends, they may not. You might not be able to get that information if someone is not like coherent, but you still want to find out. You have to get someone to medical attention if you suspect that they have been drugged or that they are over intoxicated. If someone is in your space, not only from a liquor liability standpoint, but if someone is so intoxicated that they cannot stand up, that they cannot make eye contact, and whatever, um, there is the obligation to call for medical attention. And I think it's important to ask first. So asking for consent, like, can I call an ambulance for you? And you can discuss this to an extent, because some people are like, no, I'm fine, like I just need a cab, whatever. It's like, well, I'm concerned about your safety. If we call an ambulance, at least then they can keep an eye on you until it's safe for you to get home. Like don't worry, it won't take too long, that sort of thing. um you do not have to call the police. And let's say someone comes to you and be like, somebody groped me in the washroom, whatever it is, and the survivor does not have to report to police. So if someone discloses to you, sometimes our instinct can be like, we should call the police or whatever. It's like, you don't have to call the police, and the survivor doesn't have to call the police. If they decide to seek medical attention and they have been assaulted at the hospital, they will be given the option to have a kit done, all those things. Time is of the essence, because when you want to assess whether someone has been drugged or not, there's a short window in order to check someone's urine or their blood and all those things, depending on what they've been intoxicated with. Does anybody have any questions so far about that? um I know it's not ideal, and it's like a heavy thing to discuss, but it's definitely something that if we're paying attention, we can intervene in before harm has occurred. And the next thing we want to do is we want to document the incident. So let's say you've made a choice not to call the police, or someone has like really refused medical attention. um Again, it's like, you don't just like put them in an Uber and send them on their way. Like that's just not, you just have to get to a point where someone is like, how can I convince you that this is the right choice? You know what I mean? Document the incident, meaning time, date, description, um the guest list that night, all of those things. You want to document that. Now, this is really important. Let's say that there is a harm doer in your space and you have identified this person, or you've witnessed this person causing harm, right? It is important that they're to name that sometimes it is the appropriate response to call the police. What considerations The consideration I want you to make is this person more likely to experience police brutality, profiling, or other violence? If the answer is yes, and we know that those are, Black folks, brown folks, Latinx folks, so in general, people of color, men, as well as queer folks are more likely to experience police brutality. If the answer is yes, ask if there's someone you can call for them, as well as have someone present to witness their arrest. And now, what I will say, you know, I very much have a stance of like, someone who's intentionally causing harm, someone who's intentionally perpetrating gender-based violence, sexual violence, like fuck them for sure. On one hand, on the other hand, I believe in transformative justice, and I believe in the ability to repair harm. And so when we find out that someone has caused harm, how do we resource that person that is separate from the harm that they've caused, that is separate from the space in which they've caused harm, and set them up so that they then too are not the victim of other types of harm, especially institutional. So yeah, is it going to be ideal to be like, I have to watch this person who just like tried to commit harm against somebody, I'm protecting them? It's like, that's what change looks like as far as I'm concerned. um this is also so gendered, right? This is a very gendered conversation. We know that women and trans folks are disproportionately negatively affected by sexual violence and gender-based violence. We know that men represent the group of people who disproportionately perpetrate it. That does not mean that it doesn't exist across genders and across sexualities. It absolutely does. And so we also don't want to make assumptions about that. And we also want to bring our assumptions with us when we're evaluating a situation. All right. I offer to you the Brave model. I'm not going to go through all of this in complete detail, but this is something that was developed by my mentor, Farah Khan, and you can access this online. And we don't always know what to say when someone has been harmed. We don't always know what to do. I think there's that instinct to be like, I'm going to get them, or like, da, 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 whatever it is. But the Brave model invites us to begin by listening, to respect confidentiality, to ask what support looks like to them, to validate them, and to empathize, right? And these are going to be nuanced approaches, but if you can always kind of remember to yourself, like, I need to listen. I don't need to insert my thoughts or my feelings into this situation. I don't need to represent my anger unless they're inviting you to share how you feel about it, right? And when it comes to supporters' responses to things, supporters need support as well. And that's where the debriefing and checking in is so important. It doesn't mean that you're making it about you. It doesn't mean that you're centering yourself. It could be triggering to you to receive disclosures. As someone who receives disclosures all the time, it can be really activating. And for me, my job is to find the appropriate spaces to process that. Right. So if you are someone who is consistently in a role of supporting, make sure that you are also supported. That's the only way to make sure that things are sustainable. All right. And I want to give you some notes on consent. Before I do that, does anybody in the chat, does anybody have any thoughts, questions, feelings, concerns, challenges, anything I haven't touched on that they would really like me to be more specific about? Again, these slides are going to be made available to you. I'll email them to everyone who registered, as well as I'll probably upload the video on YouTube. I wonder what it'll look like. Like, I don't know if it's just going to be the slides or if you're going to see me. Like, I have no idea, but either way. You also don't have to put it in the chat to everyone. You can directly message me. I won't use your name. The reason why I want to make some notes on consent, or why I want to name some things about consent, is because the biggest barrier to survivor support, as well as survivor disclosure, is victim blaming. And victim blaming does not have to be like as explicit as we think. It's not like, well, I don't believe you. It is the process that we go through that when we're assessing a situation, and we're like, well, like, they were there, or like, and I want to talk about consent, which consent is freely given. It is reversible. It is enthusiastic. It is informed, meaning you have all the information you need to make the decisions that you're making. It's specific and it's sober, right? And when I say it's sober, the legal definition of consent is sober. So technically speaking, legal definition of consent is that anybody you've got in your establishment who gets fucked up and then like goes home with somebody, that could be you, that could be whatever, that was not a consensual experience. Okay. What we know is that many wanted experiences happen while intoxicated. Intoxication does not equal unwanted experiences, and intoxication does not equal harm. Does intoxication impact our ability to make decisions that we would make while we were sober? Absolutely. Right? As I was saying, one of the biggest barriers to people disclosing harm has happened to them, whether it's like in real time or after the fact, is that there is this notion, and a widely accepted notion, that it's like, well, you chose to be intoxicated. People can choose to be intoxicated. It does not mean that they choose to be harmed, right? So default setting, I don't care if someone has been at your bar all night flirting with everybody, drinking, doing whatever, and then they've reported, they've like, that person harassed me. We don't get to be like, well, you were up on everybody's whatever. No, none of that. Intoxication, choice to be intoxicated, does not mean that they choose to be harmed, right? Default setting, nobody chooses to be harmed. We believe you, it's not your fault, right? And as I said, many wanted experiences happen while intoxicated, whether that's like going home with somebody or dancing up on somebody or whatever it is. Ensuring that experiences are the most wanted experiences as possible is about intention. So inviting a culture of consumption in your space that is about intentionality. is going to help to prevent unwanted experiences from happening. Because as I said, some people are out here and they're trying to cause harm. A lot of people just get drunk and make choices they wouldn't make otherwise, right? And that's true across all the things. And I absolutely have a whole program that is about how to have more wanted experiences while intoxicated. That's not what this is about, but just know that the harm reduction approach is to set ourselves up to have the most wanted experiences as possible. Any questions, thoughts, concerns about that? Clarifications? All right. What we've talked about has been challenging. I know that it can be difficult for some people to discuss these things or to reflect on circumstances that they've personally experienced, or areas where they don't feel like they have the mobility or the agency to like make the changes that they want to make. Again, I just invite these as concepts and ideas that you can bring to the forefront of your mind and to try to plan for, and to try to equip yourself with, and to try to create as like mainstream and normal ways of being in your spaces. And I just want us to bring it back and just bring it down, and just to get grounded by this photo of Lolly, my cat. She is a senior now. She is geriatric, still acts like a kitten. If you know me, I try to live like Lolly to the best of my ability. I'm actually shocked she hasn't like burst in here, but it's probably because I filled her bowl before we got started. Here's another photo of Lolly. She's just resting. She's a big fan of plaid. She really likes this plaid button up that she has. I have a matching one that we both wear. Taking deep breaths and looking at this other photo of Lolly, where look at how proud she is. Like she's really proud here. You can tell her tail's all fluffed up. Like she's really reflective and like having a nice time. And Lolly too likes to rest, likes to get grounded, likes to be spiritual. And I think it's important that we all take a Lolly approach to this very difficult season ahead of us, not only because we're in a pandemic, not only because we live in hell, not only because we don't know what's coming next, not only because everybody is wilding, but because we cannot take care of others if we do not take care of ourselves. So I just want everyone to make sure that they are resting as much as they need to, and that they are using coping mechanisms and things like that that are going to be the most sustainable and effective for what is sure to be a really fun time ahead as well. All right, that's all I have for you. These are some of the resources. I'm going to forward this along so that you have access to these things that you can like brief yourself on, and just to feel equipped with these different blah, blah, blahs. Okay. How was that? Is everybody feeling good? What's going on? Thank you so much, everyone. Appreciate it. You can contact me via email if you need to, samanthebiddy@gmail.com. Thank you for your time and your energy in attending this. Yeah. If there aren't any questions, I'm gonna bounce. I'm gonna have a little nap, you know? Sounds good? Bye everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you.